The dress was supposed to be mine, every stitch, every sparkle, every dream sewn into its fabric. But on the morning of my sister's wedding, as I stepped into her room, I froze. There she stood, glowing in the gown I had designed. My dream dress. The dream dress. I stood in front of the mirror, the delicate lace and satin of my dream wedding dress shimmering in the soft light of my sewing room. I had spent countless hours designing and sewing every detail, pouring my heart and soul into every stitch. This dress was more than just a beautiful gown to me. It was a symbol of my dreams, my hopes, and my future. As a child, I had always been fascinated by fashion, spending hours sketching designs and watching tutorials. My room was filled with fashion magazines, fabric scraps, and half-finished projects. My parents, though not fashionistas themselves, encouraged my creativity, providing me with the tools and support I needed to hone my skills. As I grew older, my passion for fashion only deepened. I began to realize that I wanted to make a career out of it. I started designing clothes for my friends and family, and they would often compliment me on my talent. But for now, I was content with designing my own wedding dress, a masterpiece that would make me feel like a princess on my big day. My sister, Rachel, had always been the glamorous one in the family. She was beautiful, popular, and used to getting her way. We had always been different, like two sides of the same coin. While she was outgoing and confident, I was more reserved and introspective. But despite our differences, I had always thought that our relationship was strong. Rachel would often come to me for fashion advice, and I would happily provide her with suggestions and ideas. But when I showed her my dream wedding dress design, she laughed and told me it was too plain, too boring. "You'll never wear that," she said with a smirk. "You need something more flashy, more attention-grabbing." I tried to brush off her comments, but they lingered in my mind. I worked even harder on my design, pouring all my emotions into it. I would spend hours researching different fabrics, colors, and embellishments, determined to create a dress that would surpass my sister's expectations. As the months went by, my dress began to take shape. I would try on different parts of it, feeling the fabric against my skin and imagining how it would look on my wedding day. I was determined to make it perfect, to make it a dress that would make me feel like the most beautiful bride in the world. I would often imagine walking down the aisle, my father by my side, and my fiancé's eyes lighting up as he saw me. I would picture the way the dress would flow behind me, the way the lace would catch the light, and the way the satin would shimmer in the sun. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I began to realize that my sister's wedding was approaching fast. Rachel had been engaged for a few months, and her wedding was scheduled for the summer. I was happy for her, or at least I tried to be. However, as the wedding day drew near, I started to feel a pang of sadness. I would be attending my sister's wedding, watching her walk down the aisle in her beautiful dress, and I wouldn't be able to help but think about my own wedding. I would wonder if I would ever get to wear my dream dress, to feel like the most beautiful bride in the world. And then the unthinkable happened. Rachel's wedding got moved up suddenly, and she announced that she would be getting married in just a few weeks. I was shocked, not just because of the short notice, but also because I knew that my dress was still in my sewing room, unfinished. I pushed aside my concerns and offered to help Rachel with her wedding preparations. But as the days went by, I began to notice that my sister was being secretive and evasive. She would whisper to our mother and laugh, and I could sense that something was going on. And then I discovered the truth. My dream dress was gone. Panic set in as I frantically searched every room, but it was nowhere to be found. I knew I had to confront Rachel about this, but a part of me was scared of what I might find out. Had she taken my dress? And if so, why? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the dress. This was about my sister's inability to respect my boundaries, my dreams, and my desires. This was about the fact that she always got what she wanted, no matter who she hurt in the process. As I stood there feeling helpless and betrayed, a spark of determination ignited within me. I would not let my sister get away with this. I would make sure she regretted the day she ever crossed me. And so the game began. I would pretend to forgive her, to move forward. But little did she know I had a plan to make her regret ever taking something that belonged to me. The wedding was just a few days away, and I knew I had to act fast. I would make sure that my sister's big day was one she would never forget. But not for the reasons she thought. As I stood in my room, staring at the empty space where my dress used to be. I felt a sense of determination wash over me. I would get my revenge, and I would make sure it was sweet. The morning the photos hit my feed, it felt like a small, precise knife had been set inside my chest. My phone vibrated until it blurred into a chorus of heart emojis and exclamation marks. She looks like a movie star. Where did she get that dress? Obsessed. The praise poured in for Clara as easily as water, and every drop dissolved a piece of me. I blew the image up until the pixels blurred, desperate for reassurance that I was seeing wrong. But there it was. The scalloped edge of the sleeve, the tiny double knot at the hem, the faint imperfection in the beading where I'd rushed after a sleepless night. I knew it because my hands had done those stitches. My eyes had watched the thread catch in the light. The dress in the photo wasn't similar to mine. It was mine. I called Clara, no answer. I drove there because I couldn't let silence be the only answer. When she opened the door, she was the picture of composed joy, the kind that always made people relax and give her what she wanted. She smiled, practiced and flawless, as if we were in one of those home videos where everything ends neatly. You saw them, huh? She said before I could speak. That's my dress, I said, words small and brittle. Her smile didn't falter. Oh, that? I found it at a boutique. I couldn't resist, she said, as if the confession required no consequence. She stepped aside to let me look at the living room. A glossy magazine spread made flesh. Wedding planners had already been called. A tasting menu had been chosen. A floral timeline had been pinned on the fridge. My protest hovered at the edges of the scene like an unwanted shadow. She tilted her head, feigned confusion. You're upset? Why? It looks good on me, doesn't it? This is my day. She ran a thumb along the sleeve as if she could summon the fabric itself into being. At my mother's house, the verdict was even quieter and colder. Please don't make this about a dress, she pleaded. We're so happy for Clara, there's no need to make a scene. My father gave me the old, tired look, the one that said my feelings were inconvenient. They equated peace with silence, and chose the version of harmony where only the popular story mattered. That night, alone in my apartment, grief and anger braided together, warm and complex. I pulled my old sketchbook from beneath, a stack of unpaid bills, and opened to the first page where the dress had been born, a raw line drawing that had grown into folds and pearls under my hands. Each page was a map of nights I'd given away to a future that had nothing to do with anyone else. I traced the pencil lines with my finger as though I could lift the past and press it back into place. Memories broke the walls I'd built. I remembered birthday cakes where Clara's face glowed, while my wishes dissolved into the crowd. I remembered school plays where she took applause meant for me and practiced her gratitude as she accepted it. She had always been a professional at becoming what the room needed, at reframing headlines so that she was the star, while I learned to stand in the wings and applaud. But this theft was different. This was not a trinket taken in childish mischief. This was a deliberate, loud erasure of work and identity. She had walked into my studio cold and certain, and she had taken the one masterpiece I could credibly call mine. When she smiled for the camera in that dress, she wore not only satin, she wore my years disguised as her fortune. Small, precise pieces until a shape emerges. I sat until dawn with a pen and a blank page, sketching not clothes but possibilities. If the family would not defend the truth, then truth would have to be undeniable. I remembered the little things that could be traced back to me, the tailors, receipts with my notes, the dye batch numbers scribbled on a paper towel, the late-night videos from my phone where my hands fumbled, the beads onto thread, proof, small, stupid pieces of evidence that could be stitched back together into a narrative no one could ignore. So I began to plan, not with rage that spilled and burned, but with a patient hand. Revenge, I decided, would not be spectacle for spectacle's sake. It would be surgical, precise exposure, unshakable evidence, public clarity. I would not become a spiteful caricature. I would become an author of facts. Clara could keep the spotlight for now. I would wait. I would gather. I would prepare. And when her perfect moment glittered the brightest, the light would catch on the wrong thing, the truth, and then refract into a story. Everyone would finally see. When anger cools into something that looks suspiciously like calm, the mind sharpens. Mine felt like a sewing needle again. Thin, focused, able to pierce only what I aimed at. I did not want chaos or a public meltdown. I wanted clarity. I wanted everyone to see the truth as plainly as a label sewn into a collar. So I began to plan, slowly, meticulously, the way I built my dress. First, I gathered proof. Proof is boring on its own, but irrefutable proof is heavy as stone. I dug through every corner of my life for the breadcrumbs I'd left. A crumpled till receipt from the fabric store where I had bought the rare ivory satin. A video on my old phone where my hands trembled while I sewed the final hem. A smudge of dye behind a sketchbook page with the batch number. I'd scribbled in the margins. Each tiny thing was a stitch. Together they could form a seam no one could ignore. Next, I mapped Clara. I watched her not with hate but with a craftsman's curiosity. Where did she shop? Whose praise did she crave? Which of her friends repeated the stories she wanted told? The patterns emerged. She liked curated images, glossy moments, distractions that glittered so bright they shoved the small, honest things into shadow. Her strength was spectacle. Her weakness was proof. I started quietly, small questions asked in casual conversations, a text to an old boutique owner who had sold a one-of-a-kind dress recently, a polite email to a photographer about the original files of the engagement shoot. I placed subtle markers, an offhand comment in the family group about how much, quietly. If I wanted people to believe me, I could not sound like someone clinging to anger. I would be precise. I would present paper trails, timestamps, and witnesses. I would let evidence, not emotion, do the work. I also planned for optics. Clara's circle of friends moved fast. Rumor could be a runaway dress. So I built a slow, steady narrative. A close friend of mine, Zara, who had always seen me and not just the shadow beside, Clara, agreed to keep her eyes open and to let the truth land in small, believable places. A private message forwarded to one thoughtful aunt. A casual comment to someone who was already skeptical. I didn't need to shout. I needed pockets of doubt to grow into conviction. There were practical measures, too. I learned where Clara's dress had been altered and who had the final fittings. I made a quiet appointment, under the guise of curiosity, and watched the seamstress examine the stitching, the unique backstitch I used, the particular knot at the sleeve. The seamstress's eyebrows rose. She asked a question I had been waiting for. "Did you make this?" I watched my moment crystallize. She assumed I meant to claim credit for the workmanship. I let her ask, and I let the truth fall out when it did. My plan was not cruelty wrapped in glamour. I avoided humiliation. I avoided traps that could be called spiteful. Revenge, I decided, had to be elegant, surgical exposure rather than petty war. I would not lie, blackmail, or sabotage. I would not break things. I would show what already existed, and I would let the weight of facts do the rest. As the wedding approached, I assembled my little dossier, clear photos of the fabric purchase receipt, time-stamped videos of my stitching, a sworn note from Mrs. Alvey confirming the dye batch, messages where Clara had admired my sketches, and the seamstress's surprised admission. I printed everything on crisp paper, arranged it in a slim folder, and slipped it into my bag like a needle tucked into silk. The plan was simple in its cruelty. Reveal at a moment when silence would have been convenient, and truth would be unavoidable. Some nights I wondered if I should forgive and walk away. The answer came in the quiet space between my breaths, not from a place of malice, but from a place that knew the cost of being invisible. I had given years to making something beautiful. No one had the right to rename it. I was not a woman who wanted to ruin a day. I was a woman who wanted her work to be seen. And so I waited, patient as a seamstress threading a needle, watching the calendar inch closer. Not with glee, but with a calm that came from knowing every stitch I'd ever made would finally be recognized. Someone else's movie. A soft morning sky painted in gold. Flowers everywhere. The kind of day that makes even broken things look beautiful. The entire city seemed to hum with excitement. For everyone else, it was Clara's day. The biggest day of her perfect life. For me, it was the day I woke early. My hands trembled as I fastened the buttons of my simple navy dress. Elegant, but quiet. I didn't want attention. I wanted presence. There's a difference. I braided my hair, tied it neatly, and looked at my reflection. The woman in the mirror didn't look angry anymore. She looked steady, like a storm that had already passed and left calm behind. When I reached the wedding venue, an enormous garden lit with ribbons and chandeliers, the noise was overwhelming. People laughed, photographers shouted, waiters carried trays of champagne. I moved like a ghost through the crowd unnoticed, the folder of proof tucked carefully into my clutch. Then through the chatter, a hush rippled. Guests turned toward the grand staircase. There she was, Clara, glowing like a magazine cover. Her smile wide, her steps graceful. Cameras flashed. For a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. My dress, my creation, it had never looked so alive. The ivory satin shimmered, catching the light exactly how I'd imagined it. Every stitch, every fold, every thread, I knew them all. A strange mix of emotions hit me. Pride, sadness, anger, disbelief. I had loved that dress once. Now I couldn't tell if it still belonged to me, or if I'd given it away the moment I let her steal it. She reached the altar. Her groom looked at her like she was made of light. My parents, glowing with pride, whispered to each other. No one saw the truth hiding in plain sight, that the masterpiece they admired had been stolen. Then came the moment that would change everything. As the vows began, the afternoon sun slipped through the glass ceiling and poured directly onto Clara's gown. The light caught the lower edge of the skirt, the part most people never noticed. And there it was, faint but visible, the tiny stitched initials I had sewn on the inner hem months ago. Evelyn Moore, my name? A murmur spread through the rows. Wait, are there letters on her dress? Whispered one of the bridesmaids. What does that mean? Another guest raised their phone to zoom in. The photographer crouched closer, snapping pictures. Clara's face froze. She blinked, smiled too wide, and said, "Oh, it's part of the design. Just a detail from the boutique." Her voice wobbled slightly. People looked at each other. Confusion rippled like wind across a calm lake. After the ceremony, the crowd gathered around her for photos. That's when I stepped forward. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like thunder under my ribs, but my voice, when it came out, was calm. "Beautiful dress," I said softly. "Almost like it was made just for you." Clara turned, her smile faltering. "Thank you," she said tightly. I nodded and set my clutch on the nearby table. From it, I pulled out the folder, neat, unassuming, like it contained nothing more than receipts. I opened it slowly. "You might want to see this," I said, my tone almost polite. The first photo showed my original sketch, dated, signed. Then came the receipts, fabric store bills, dye orders, messages between me and the seamstress. People began to gather. The murmurs grew louder. A bridesmaid gasped. The photographer leaned over to look closer. "I made this dress," I said, quiet but clear. "Every bead, every stitch, every line. And I can prove it." Clara's mouth opened, but no words came. The color drained from her face. My mother stepped forward, whispering, "Evelyn, please." "Not here." I met her eyes. "You asked me not to ruin her big day." "But I didn't ruin it, Mom. She did." The seamstress from Clara's final fitting, who happened to be one of the guests, stepped closer, curiosity on her face. "Wait," she said, squinting at the folder. I recognized the stitching, that double backstitch at the seam. I asked about it when I adjusted the waistline. She turned toward Clara. "You told me you bought it from a designer named Elise?" Whispers spread like wildfire. The groom's expression changed. Confusion, then realization. "Clara, you lied?" he asked, voice low but cutting. "It was a misunderstanding," she stammered. "I meant it was inspired." But no one was listening. The truth was already out. It didn't need my anger anymore. It stood on its own. Simple, undeniable, shining like sunlight on satin. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You took something that wasn't yours, and now everyone knows." Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I could hear whispers, confusion, and the faint click of cameras. Reporters, maybe, or just curious guests documenting the fall of perfection. Outside, the sun was warm, and for the first time in a long while, I felt light. I had spent months waiting to be seen, not to be celebrated, but simply acknowledged. And in that moment, I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. The truth at last was wearing its own kind of dress, mine. Would you like me to continue with Section 5? The truth revealed next. The aftermath at the reception, the emotional fallout, Clara's humiliation, and the MC's quiet satisfaction? It deepens every moment. Emotion, setting, and revenge payoff. while keeping it intense, elegant, and satisfying, around 3,000 plus characters. Section 5, The Final Stitch. The night was dazzling, the kind that tried too hard to be perfect. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across golden tablecloths, laughter echoed over clinking glasses, and the scent of roses hung thick in the air. Everything was beautiful, except the truth. I stood quietly near the entrance, wearing a simple black dress I'd made myself. Nothing extravagant, but sharp, deliberate. My eyes followed my sister Clara as she floated across the ballroom like the queen she believed herself to be. Every camera turned toward her, every whisper full of admiration. And there it was, my dress. Even from across the room, I could trace every stitch, every fold, every secret detail I had poured my heart into. The lace sleeves I'd hand-sewn late at night. The pearl buttons I'd chosen after weeks of searching, all shimmering under the ballroom lights. And yet no one clapped for the artist. They clapped for the thief. My parents beamed with pride, completely blind to the fact that their golden daughter was wrapped in someone else's dreams. My mother even bragged. Clara found that gown at a boutique in Milan. I almost laughed. She hadn't even changed the design, just replaced the tag. But I didn't come to cry. I came to end this. Over the past few weeks, I had carefully gathered everything. My sketches, my sewing videos, receipts, and the photo where Clara had secretly tried on the dress before taking it. And tonight, those quiet efforts would speak louder than any accusation ever could. The music softened. The blogger I'd invited stepped toward the stage, microphone in hand. She smiled brightly as she knew what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "before we continue, I'd love to take a moment to appreciate this incredible gown. It's absolutely breathtaking, and I just found out something amazing about it." The room stilled. All eyes turned to her. Clara's smile twitched, but she kept posing, pretending nothing was wrong. "This gown," the blogger continued, "wasn't bought from a boutique. It was designed and handmade by Clara's sister, an extraordinary designer with real talent and heart." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. And then, on the giant screen behind the DJ booth, my sketches appeared. My notes, progress photos, and the final design shot on my mannequin filled the display. Side by side with Clara's stolen version, the resemblance was undeniable. Clara froze. Her fiancé, Liam, turned toward her slowly, confusion turning into disbelief. "You told me you bought it from Italy," he whispered. Her face went white. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered, eyes darting to me like daggers. But the room was already murmuring. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Someone muttered, "She stole her sister's work?" Another voice whispered, "Unbelievable." I didn't move. I didn't need to. Watching the perfect image Clara had built crack under the weight of truth was enough. For years, she'd taken credit, attention, and love that wasn't hers. And now the spotlight that once adored her had become a mirror she couldn't escape. Mom tried to calm her, but even she couldn't hide the shame in her eyes. Dad just stared at the screen, silent. For once, everyone could see me. Not the shadow behind my sister, but the artist, the dreamer, the wronged one. Clara stumbled off stage, heels clicking too fast, mascara running. When she passed by me, she hissed under her breath, "You ruined everything." I looked at her steadily. "No, Clara," I said quietly. "You did, the moment you decided my dream was yours to steal." And then I walked away. Outside, the night air felt cool against my skin. I could still hear the distant echoes of music, but they no longer belonged to her world. They belonged to mine. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten sister. I was the one who created beauty and protected it. As I reached the parking lot, I caught my reflection in a car window, calm, strong, and free. My lips curved into a small smile. Revenge hadn't made me cruel. It had made me whole. The final stitch wasn't in the dress, and it was in me, sealing every wound she'd ever opened. And this time, no one could steal it. Would you like me to write a final epilogue next when showing what happens to both sisters months later? Clara's downfall and the MC's quiet rise as a fashion designer? It'll close the story with a powerful emotional ending 3 months after the wedding that never happened. Life felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just different. The house that was once filled with wedding chaos and laughter now stood still. The flowers had long wilted, the glittering decorations boxed away, and the gossip that once burned like wildfire had cooled into whispers. People had stopped asking questions, but they hadn't forgotten. Clara's name had become something people said in hushed tones. Such a shame, they'd murmur. She had everything and looks, charm, a perfect life. But perfection built on lies never lasts. The morning after that unforgettable night, her fiancé Liam released a statement. It was short, cold, and devastating. Trust is the foundation of love. Without it, a wedding is just a performance. That sentence spread faster than any rumor. By noon, Clara's picture, still wearing my dress gown, had gone viral, captioned with headlines like, "The bride who stole her sister's dream." And me, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken loud enough. For a while I stayed away from everyone, even my parents. The silence between us was heavy, stitched with guilt and regret. They tried calling, sending short messages like, "We didn't know," or "She made a mistake." But I couldn't bring myself to respond, not out of hate, but because I finally needed to live outside that family shadow. To breathe as me one rainy evening, I sat in my small studio apartment, surrounded by scraps of fabric and half-finished sketches. The storm outside was fierce, wind tapping against the window like it wanted to come in. I sipped tea and thought about everything that had happened. How something I'd once made out of love had been turned into a weapon, and then into a miracle. And smiled. Not the proud, victorious smile of revenge, but the quiet, grateful smile of someone who finally sees their own worth. A week later, the article went live. My designs were showcased. The comments were filled with kindness. "She deserves the world. Look at that craftsmanship. She turned pain into art." Orders started flowing in. Brides wanted dresses that told stories. Designers reached out to collaborate. I even got an invitation to present at a small local fashion show. It wasn't Paris or Milan, but it was a beginning, one I had stitched with my own two hands. Meanwhile, Clara disappeared from social media. For months, no one saw her. Eventually, word spread that she'd moved to another city, trying to start fresh. When I finally saw her again, at our mother's birthday dinner, she looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. The glow she used to have, the arrogance that lit every room, gone. When our eyes met, I expected hatred, but instead there was something else. Shame, regret, maybe even apology. She walked past me quietly, said hi, and sat down. That single word felt heavier than a speech. Mom tried to fill the silence, asking if we could just move on. And maybe, for the first time, I realized I already had. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had everything she'd tried to steal. Not fame or applause, but peace, purpose, and a name that finally belonged to me. That night, when I returned home, I opened the glass case on my studio shelf. Inside lay a delicate piece of lace, the first swatch from the dream dress. I had kept it even when everything else felt ruined. I ran my fingers over the soft pattern, the thread shining under my lamp. It reminded me that creation and destruction live side by side, that sometimes people have to break you to show you what you're made of. I placed the lace back and turned to my sketch pad. A new design waited there, elegant, bold, free. Across the top of the page, I had written the name in neat, flowing letters. The Phoenix Collection, because like the mythical bird, I had burned, and I had risen again, a brighter, stronger, unstoppable. When dawn came, sunlight spilled across my work table, lighting up the fabrics in gold and silver. The air smelled like coffee and new beginnings. I picked up my pencil and started to draw again. Each stroke felt lighter, freer, not bound by bitterness, but driven by passion. This time I wasn't creating to prove anything. I was creating because I could. And as I sewed the first piece of my new collection, I whispered softly to myself. The final stitch was never, it was rebirth.